It was Atlanta, 2005-ish. My best friend was in town, and she was able to get us a nice hotel room near bars with her points. We got back to the hotel late, but before midnight we were intoxicated, but not blackout drunk. Got ready for bed, and in our jammies and fell right to sleep in the queen-size bed. Several hours later, I woke up bleary-eyed and I saw a tall man staring at us, and in my stupor, calmly asked, "What are you doing here?" My friend then woke up at the sound of my voice and asked what was going on. He seemed frozen like a deer in headlights. He told us he was hotel security and there had been a report of a disturbance, and he was there to ask us to quiet down. Confused, we told him we'd been asleep for hours, and he told us, "Okay, have a good night." He left the door and we went right back to sleep. The next morning we went down to talk to management because, as we discussed, we realized something very strange had happened. Management talked to my friend and then called someone more senior to talk to her. As they brought out the second person and they spoke with her, she became sheet white. They had no on-site security team, and no one had called to any disturbances the night before. They immediately moved us to a different room and upgraded the rest of our stay. To this day, I wonder if that room was targeted because it was only supposed to have one woman in there at the time. And when the person saw two of us, they panicked and decided not to move forward. I also wonder what would happen if our reaction had not been tempered by alcohol and dreaming state. If we had screamed, would that have triggered something more sinister? My husband and I treated ourselves to a night at the Radisson Blu in downtown Chicago. We don't get to do things like this usually, so it was awesome. The rates were very inexpensive, and there were certain things that you had no access to, but we didn't care. Since there wasn't room service, we ordered off Uber Eats. Nothing fancy, just potbellies. I went downstairs. It's 10 p.m. to wait and smoke a cigarette. To be kind, I went around the side, but still near the front. There was no one walking around. I got the food, but decided to finish smoking around the side. Suddenly, a really nicely dressed dude with a camo mask walked up and asked me for a cigarette. Normally that's not an issue, but he seemed a bit off. I can't explain it, except to say as soon as he asked me, I felt like something was wrong, and his voice sounded odd. When I gave him a cigarette, he got really close. Then it started to get scary. He asked for some food. I felt bad, but it wasn't possible to give him food. It was 2 sandwiches. I said I was sorry, but it was for my husband and I. I figured he'd leave and I could finish smoking. Instead, he walked up so close he was against the food bag, and I was against the other side, almost pressing against the glass. Then he asked for some food again, and when I said no, I'm really sorry, he insisted I could, but I was lying. He was getting angry, but he wasn't yelling, so not to attract attention, I guess. It continued like that for a few minutes. Then he asked to use my lighter. I gave it to him, and he started on how I was lying again. He insisted I could give him food. Then he asked if I worked there, and I said I was staying at the hotel. I was already really nervous. He asked where I was staying, and I asked why. He said because there were a lot of hotels in the area. I pointed at the hotel behind me. I don't know why. I was really anxious at this point. This whole interaction was so scary, and I usually have no issues dealing with people. However, he was getting pushier and angrier, and then he said, "So you're staying here?" I said yes. During this entire time, he kept saying I was lying about the food. Again, he started getting closer and closer to me as I backed up. He kept angrily insisting that I could give him food, but didn't want to. I said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't." We were already too close for comfort and safe distances. He was pressing against the bag and I was holding it against my chest. His face was inches from mine. Then he said, "So you're here with your boyfriend?" I said, "Husband," and I saw him check my hand. I started walking backwards to the back door, which was probably about 50 feet away. I thought if I didn't act afraid, it would turn out better, but I was afraid. His cigarette was lit and he was still holding my lighter. People usually give it back at this point. He kept demanding some food. I felt this was time to be more assertive, so I demanded my lighter back, and he started to get even more angry at me, saying over and over that I could give him some food. He then gave me back my lighter, but grabbed both of my arms. I started getting terrified and banging on the glass door with my elbows to get the receptionist's attention, but she ignored me. He got pissed and said something, but I was so scared I wasn't paying attention. I just wanted help. If anyone reading this knew me, they'd know I'd never bang on a window yelling for help unless I was absolutely terrified. I started crying because I was alone on a side street at night and no one could help me. I had no thoughts but to get away. I wasn't thinking he'd hurt me in a specific way. I just thought danger, run. That's how scared I was. He got angry that I was crying and pulled me closer. Suddenly something happened that changed everything, and I'm so grateful. My mom called. I had my earbuds in, which you couldn't see because my hood was up on my coat. So I pressed answer and started crying hysterically and almost screaming, "He's trying to attack me! He's trying to attack me!" That really angered him because he tightened his grip for a second, but also startled him, and he let go, and I ran to the doors while still crying and shaking. I cried all the way back to the room. My mom comforted me on the phone and told me not to go back outside again. My husband was very comforting and sweet. He just held me, and then he wanted to know everything. I had to say it a few times because I was still crying and couldn't breathe. Plus, I was talking fast. I saw him again, maybe 1 a.m. I was standing in front of the hotel this time by all those tall ashtray things they have outside restaurants and hotels. I wasn't alone though. A security guard was beside me. I went inside and saw him through the glass where he had assaulted me. I don't know if he was waiting for me or what, but it terrified me. That same night, another person asked me for a cigarette, and it was a really nice woman. She thanked me, but she could tell I was upset, I guess. She asked and I told her. She sympathized and explained that's why she carried a very small handgun which was in her purse. I'm definitely getting mace, so this doesn't happen again. This happened February 14th, Valentine's Day. Me and 2 of my friends decided we would get a cheap hotel room and they would take some LSD to kick off the loneliest holiday ever. I've done it before, but I wasn't in a good mindset to take it that night, so I settled for a bottle of wine. Anyway, we weren't familiar with the area of the hotel motel that we booked the room at, but it was cheap, and that's all that really mattered to us. It was around 3 in the morning, and outside the door we hear someone stumbling around and bumping into the walls. But it was Valentine's Day, so we brushed it off as a drunk couple going to get it on. The stumbling stops outside of our door and just got silent. My friends are tripping at this point, and I'm pretty drunk. We hear this woman start sobbing outside of our door, and I'm assuming she sat down on her back on our door, because we heard her slide down the wall and collapse right on the other side. The woman starts trying to speak to us through the cracks of the door outline, saying she lost her dogs and was wondering if we could help her. It was 3 a.m. and we didn't know shit about the area, so common sense would say don't respond. So we didn't. The woman then proceeds to bang on the door, saying we stole her dogs and she's gonna come in and fucking murder us. She was scratching and banging at the door for 10 minutes straight and then just stopped. My friends are starting to have a bad trip because of her, and when she stopped I tried to reassure them she was gone and they could go back to having a good time. To prove it to my friends, I checked through the peephole to verify that this woman was indeed gone. The bitch was trying to stare right back at me through the other side of the peephole. I watched her as she stepped back and stood there, as still and solid as a literal concrete statue. She had her eyes right on the peephole, staring right into my eye. I doubt she could see me through the peephole, but I was making dead eye contact with her. The woman then proceeds to start screaming and throwing her body against the door, which thankfully woke up our neighbors, and they called the front desk. The woman behind the front desk comes and tries to get this woman to leave. The woman left, but was going down the hallway of the hotel being loud and not leaving the property, still crying out for her lost dogs, in the hotel hallway at 3 a.m. The cops get called on this woman and she disappeared, but she never left the hotel. Cops were running around the halls trying to find her. The woman from the front desk asked me if I could give a better description or any information to the police. Me, being an underage girl drunk out of my mind, tried to decline, but the cops ended up coming to my door anyway. I tried my best to act like an innocent little sober girl. They said they never saw her leave and implied that she's still inside, so they just told me to keep an eye out for her and call the front desk if anything else happens. The police stayed posted on the outside of the hotel for about an extra 30 minutes, then left. Turns out this bitch was just on crack, but still, hearing this woman throw her body onto the door saying she would kill us was traumatizing enough. We left early that morning and never went back. Thanks to this woman for killing my friend's trip and my drunkenness. So this happened roughly about 2 years ago. I worked at a hotel, which had about 50 rooms between 3 floors. I was the only employee in the building after about 5 p.m., and it should be noted that I'm a girl. The hotel is on the furthest side of the city, but considered to be one of the nicer side. So a lot of the companies will send their workers to us for room and board, instead of the shadier motels on the opposite side of the city. Some of them were great guests, others were completely trash, but that happens everywhere, I suppose. The layout of the building was pretty simple. You pull up to the front entrance, enter the foyer, and the front desk lobby is right through a set of automatic doors. Right across the hall from the lobby was a staircase leading up to the second floor, and to the left was our elevators and to the second and third floor. The first floor only has rooms on one side, to compensate for our pool, workout room, and breakfast area, dining room, lobby, office rooms, all being on the opposite side. The upper floors have rooms on each side, with the third floor having the most rooms. Typically the third floor, the highest, we kept only for business and long stays. Second floor was reserved for short stays or bigger parties, and the first floor we kept open for elders who have wheelchairs or walkers, or people who come in late at night for a one-night stay. I promise this is relevant to the story. Anyway, it was getting towards the last few hours of my shift. It was slow that night, aside from a few work groups I had checked in a few hours earlier. I noticed a raggedy, rusted, and beat-up black pickup truck pulling into the brightly lit car pit. So I got my paperwork ready for a check-in. The guy gets out, completely covered in dirt. I figured he had just got off of work, as most guys come covered in dirt or oil. I do specifically remember that he reeked, which isn't out of the norm either. Entirely, I just chalked it up to him being an oil field or construction worker. I got his credentials. His name was Michael, and I scanned it into the computer. He was also very reluctant to leave his vehicle information with me, but I explained if he didn't, his vehicle was at risk of being towed by morning. I thought he caved just because he was going to be here for the night. Michael requested a second room close to the lobby staircase so he could have easy access to the front doors for smoking. Not out of the norm either. After taking his payment, I set up his room keys. I explained parking, policies, and explained how he can get into his room, which was right up the staircase and the door was on the opposite wall. He had a few bags with him. He went upstairs. Almost immediately, he comes back down the stairs and accuses me of giving him broken room keys. I had to explain if he put them next to his phone or anywhere near a magnet, potentially in his wallet, the keys will deactivate. I did offer to take him upstairs and open the room for him to make sure the new set of keys worked, and they did. He walked into his room by himself, shut the door, so with that, I was on my way back down to the lobby. When I got back in the office, something odd caught my eye on one of the cameras. He hadn't left the building, but his car wasn't in the front anymore. He didn't mention anything about having another person with him. If there was, we were supposed to charge a $10 fee for extra person. The side doors don't open unless you have a room key, or you are on the inside of the hotel. So I started to watch the cameras to make sure he wasn't trying to sneak people in. About 20 minutes pass, and I notice nothing is happening outside except for him coming down the stairs. I smile politely as he goes outside. He stays outside for about 10 minutes, just standing in the carport. I can see it on the camera. Now, while I thought that was a little weird, I just chalked it up to him taking a smoke. I stopped paying attention after a while and started to find my paperwork that was due before my shift ended. Michael ran back into the hotel, cigarette still in his mouth. I instructed him he must take a cigarette outside and put it out. I told him prior we do not allow smoking inside the building. He just threw it on the ground and put it out with his shoe. He turned his attention towards the TV and ended up sitting in the lobby for an ungodly amount of time. He kept glancing towards the door, which made me uncomfortable. During this time, the friendly demeanor he had at check-in completely disappeared. He now seemed paranoid and agitated. He would whisper to himself, but I couldn't hear what. After about 30 minutes of him doing this, I instructed him he needed to go back to his room because I cannot have people in the lobby when I'm working on closing procedures. It was a lie, but ownership allows us to make up reasons if we are uncomfortable with the guest's presence. Michael asked me to take him up to his room because he is uncomfortable and scared. I explained that I am unable to do that for safety reasons. What I could do was watch him go up the stairs on camera, and he could call down to the office on his room phone when he arrived to his room. I was just trying to be friendly and get him upstairs as quickly as I could. He goes upstairs, but immediately comes back down and informs me that he forgot where his room was, and I would need to show him. I told him I cannot leave the office or lobby, but I can explain it to him where his room was because it was super simple. He was continuing his whispers. This time it was about him losing his phone. I didn't pay any mind to it. After explaining to Michael where his room was, he went back upstairs and I heard the door slam shut. It echoed throughout the second and first floor and gave me chills for some reason. Almost immediately he comes back down and starts yelling at me, telling me I stole his cell phone and that I'm planning his demise and I need to find his phone. This was completely bogus, as I hadn't left the office since making sure his room key worked. He asked me for help, and I just wanted him to go away. So I slipped a screwdriver in my pocket just in case he tried to attack me, and I began rummaging around the lobby couches looking for his phone. I didn't find it, but I did find his credit card, which he also began accusing me of stealing. I stood my ground and said if he can't respect me in my place of work, I can call the police and request they escort him to his room or off the facility. He got angrier, snatched his card from my hands, and went back outside. After about 20 more minutes, he comes back inside. He is calmer, but he asked if I would please go outside with him because there is something wrong with his car. After I absolutely refuse, he tells me that I need to go outside, that it's not fair that he's the only person out there working on his car and he just needs some fucking help. I had to explain that I am not allowed to accompany a guest outside of the building. He just repeats that I absolutely have to go outside with him. Now I have anxiety and I tend to let my mind roam over wide horizons, and this was no different. I was about to have a panic attack, so I called the owners and asked them what I could do. This was my first hotel job, and although I have tons of freedom during my job, I still want to know how to properly handle these situations. The owner told me if I'm uncomfortable and suspect he is under the influence or a danger to myself or himself, I have the full reign to call the police. Have them ban him from the property. I asked if they could just keep an eye on the cameras. They have access to them because he's acting so weird. I locked all the lobby doors and made sure the side and fire exits were all properly secured and closed, so no one could sneak in. I did this while he was doing his thing on his phone with my boss because I was so scared to leave the office by myself. After getting back behind the office, I locked the door and I just braced myself for him to come back inside. My boss tells me to just watch the cameras and to keep my cell phone nearby just in case I have to call for help. Meanwhile, I noticed on the cameras I couldn't see Michael anymore. I didn't know where he parked, but I damn sure wasn't going to go looking. But what I did notice is there was another vehicle driving through our parking lot. I called the hotel next door to ask if there was a caller in the cameras too, and I was informed it was an unknown vehicle to the records. It was unknown to mine as well, and this just shot up my anxiety even higher. The car would come back around the back of the building, to the front, but avoid the carport, turn, and then do the same thing to the building next door. The parking lot was almost empty, so I know they weren't looking for a parking spot. The car keeps going, and I'm watching it on the camera, so focused that I didn't even notice Michael came back inside, telling Michael he needs to either go up to his room or vacate the premises. He just continues yelling at me, saying that I need to go outside with him. He won't move from in the front of the entrance, and I imagine he was just staying within view of whoever else he kept looking at. Then randomly, I see him sprint across the parking lot and out of the camera view. I also didn't see the car anymore after that. Since it was practically the end of my shift, I somehow managed to get everything done just in time for the next shift to arrive. I was so glad to see her I almost cried. I explained to her what had happened and that the owners want her to keep the lobby doors locked. We put up signs explaining our doors were broken, and due to safety reasons, guests would have to call for entry or use the side entrances for the room. I also deactivated Michael's room key and told the next shift girl not to let him back. If he shows up, to call the police because he is a security risk. I made sure she watched me get in my Uber ride after triple checking the vehicle and the driver matched what my phone said. Since I was a regular customer of the driver, he asked why I was so riled up. I asked him to drive through the parking lot with his door closed so I could see if Michael's truck or the other vehicle I saw driving across the parking lot were anywhere near the buildings, and they weren't. I have no idea what had happened to them. The next day I had my boyfriend come stay the entire evening shift with me just in case he came back, because I was told by my bosses that he never came to get his stuff. He wouldn't pick up the phone calls either. Nothing happened that night or any other night, except for maybe a month later. Michael came in asking about his stuff and if he could get a room. I refused his room, and luckily other people were in there with me and in the office. I had our maintenance man go retrieve his items and explain he is no longer allowed on the property. If we saw him, the police would be called and he would be arrested for trespassing. I noticed Michael had a different vehicle this time. It was a newer model SUV, and it was maroon. It matched neither his black, beat-up pickup truck or the dark-colored sedan I saw driving in circles. If there was anything that sat with me even after all this time, it was that he remembered my name. He addressed me by my name when he walked up to the counter, and at first I thought, oh yeah, my name is a part of my uniform, until I realized I had forgotten to put my name tag on that day. After that, I refused to wear one in the hotel. Management let me create a fake name and wear that from that point on. It took me a while to feel safe in that building again while I was alone. I constantly had my boyfriend with me while I worked the evening shift. There is a chance the guy in the circling vehicle are unrelated, but my anxiety and the aura I got from Michael that night, it didn't feel good or right. So Michael, let's not meet ever again.